learners, welcome to this video program on Introduction to Hydrosphere Part 2. This is a continuity of the previous program which was on Introduction to Hydrosphere Part 1. In the previous program you studied about hydrosphere. So now you know that hydrosphere is one of the subsystems of the earth, the other three being lithosphere or the land sphere, and atmosphere that is related to the air, and the biosphere which is related to the living organisms. So hydrosphere is the sum total of all water on earth, whether it is on the surface water or it is frozen waters in the form of ice caps, snow clad mountains, or it is in the form of high cloud crystals or atmospheric water, or even groundwater. So water in hydrosphere exists in all the three states, whether it is solid ice, liquid water, or as water vapor in the gaseous form. You have also studied about hydrological cycle, through which you came to know that water traverses in different realms or different spheres of earth, and the key processes are evaporation, condensation, precipitation, surface runoff, infiltration, and subsurface water flow. And you came to know that water occupies about 70% of the earth's surface and 30% only being the land surface. And water, out of this 70% of water, 97.5% exists in the oceans. So you have studied oceans in the previous part of this video program, and in this video program you will study about the water in the cryosphere and surface waters, and also underground water. All these three forms part of fresh water, which is 2.5% of the total water found on earth. So in this video program you will study about cryosphere, which is the frozen part of the hydrosphere. So let's start with cryosphere. Cryosphere is the frozen water part or the solid part of the hydrosphere. It comes from Greek word that is cryos, which means cold. It is divided into two types, that is those found on continental areas and those occupying the oceanic areas. So it is found on high latitude areas and also on high altitudes when the temperature drops below freezing point, and so water exists in the frozen form and or solid form. The continental ice sheets exist in the form of mountain glaciers, ice caps, and oceanic ice exists in the form of ice pack, ice shelf, ice floe, and iceberg. Let us get familiar with these terms. Ice pack is a massive mass of ice floating on water, and it occupies mostly parts of Arctic Sea, and due to global warming, however, their size is getting reduced these days. Similarly, ice shelf is a portion of continental ice that projects over the sea. It is also found in the polar areas like in the Antarctica, and one of the famous ice shelf is the Ross ice shelf, Larsen ice shelf. These ice shelves have also reported shrinkage in their size just because of global warming. Then there is ice floe, which is a huge mass of ice that has broken from still bigger masses of ice and are floating independently. And iceberg is another floating mass of ice that has broken from an ice shelf or a glacier. So what is a glacier? Glaciers cover about 10% of the earth's land area and are thick masses of ice on land that move downhill under the impact of gravity. So you have studied about oceanic ice masses. Now you should also know that cryosphere is subject to expansion during the winter months. Obviously during the winter months, when the temperature is very cold below the freezing point, lots of water freezes, and so there is expansion during winter months, and there is a contraction or the cryosphere is reduced in the summer months. So cryosphere is subject to fluctuation during different seasons. Another realm of world's ice is beneath the land surface. That is, frozen ground occurs when ground contains water and the temperature of the ground below goes below 0 degree centigrade. You should know that ground that remains frozen for at least 2 years in a row is called permafrost, and that is having permanently frozen subsoil. So sometimes entire townships have emerged in such areas where you have permafrost like conditions, and the animals, plants and all living organisms adapt to such kind of temperatures, and the roads are also built on these frozen ground surface, and the houses are also built, and very much depends on the temperature. If the temperature increases and these frozen soil and these permafrost conditions are changed, then they might affect the construction that is on these soil, because those roads or houses might show some cracks or break in such conditions. Can you reason out why oceanic ice is composed of fresh water and is not saline like oceanic water? This is because oceanic ice consists of ice crystals and the freezing process of water does not incorporate the salt crystals in it. And now can you also differentiate between a snow and ice? Yes, because snow is a form of precipitation and ice is it is composed of actually ice crystals, and ice is also found in ice shelf, glaciers, ice flow, and it is a constituent of every such things mentioned just now. Now let us come to another realm of hydrosphere, that is the surface water. So as the name suggests, surface waters flow on the surface of earth, and these include rivers, lakes, swamps, marshes and other wetlands. It is important for all life forms on earth because it is the only accessible water and used for drinking purposes, irrigation purposes and generating hydroelectric power and also other public services. So surface water mostly comes from rainfall runoff. Runoff goes into rivers, into vegetation, some seeps into the ground and recharges groundwater systems, and some even evaporates and a portion of it seeps into the river beds. So at a certain depth below the surface, the ground becomes saturated with water, and that level is called the water table. If a river happens to cut into this saturated layer, the water will seep out of the ground into the river. We will come about water table in the next section when we discuss about underground water. Now there are three types of surface water. They are permanent, semi-permanent and man-made. So permanent water, surface water is those type where the rivers are perennial, so they don't dry up in the arid season. They have water throughout the year. So those lakes, rivers, springs, swamps having water throughout the year are called permanent surface waters. Semi-permanent are those surface waters which dry up during the arid season, because they only come up temporarily in low-lying areas or water holes, small creeks or lagoons, and gets filled up with rainwater, and they dry up in the arid season. Similarly, man-made surface waters are those which are made by constructed by human beings, like lakes, dams, artificial swamps, sewage treatment plants, etc. Now rivers are extremely dynamic component of hydrological cycle. Rivers are fresh water, and so they are not saline like oceans. So they provide a good source of drinking water. They are used for irrigation purposes. They help in renewing the nutrients of soil, thereby making it fertile. Helps as a cheap source of transportation. No doubt they have been the settling place of civilization since the ancient times because of the enormous benefits provided by them. Now in this figure you can see some of the major rivers of the world, and we'll discuss lakes later in this section. So you also see some of the important lakes in this figure, and you can see the some of the major rivers of the world, like river Amazon in South America, river Nile in Africa, Nile, Congo, Niger, etc. in Africa, and Missouri, Mississippi river system in USA, and some of the important rivers in Asia also, like river Indus, river Ganges, river Brahmaputra, river Yangtze, Yangtze, and some of the rivers draining into the Arctic Ocean like Ob, Yenisei, Lena, etc. So you can go through the Oxford School Atlas and see the position of the rivers, where they originate and where they drain. So you can do a detailed study regarding these rivers with the help of your atlas. Now lakes is a large body of water occupying an inland basin and surrounded by land. Can you differentiate between lakes and ponds? Yes. Ponds are relatively smaller in size, similar to lakes but relatively smaller in size. And can you differentiate lakes with the rivers or streams? Yes, because rivers are mobile water bodies, they are moving water, and lakes are relatively stagnant or very slowly moving water bodies, and they are also surrounded by land from all sides. And swamps and marshes have a lot of vegetation on them compared to the lakes. So these are the differences between lakes and ponds, or lakes and rivers and streams, or lakes and swamps and marshes. You should see in the previous figure that most of the bigger lakes in the world are situated in North America, Africa and Asia. So about 70% of the world's lakes are situated in these three continents. In this figure you can also see the position of the Great Lakes in North America: Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, Ontario, and some of the lakes in the East African highlands, that is Lake Victoria, Lake Tanganyika, Lake Nyasa or Malawi, and some of the lakes in Asia region also, like Lake Baikal, Caspian Sea, Aral Sea. You should see that some of the lakes I have mentioned under sea because they are inland basin, and they contain salty water like Aral Sea and Caspian Sea. Otherwise rest of the lakes which I have mentioned earlier in the North America and Eastern African highlands contain fresh water. So Lake Baikal in Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake, largest in terms of the volume of water it contains. So it is also the deepest lake in the world. It is 1742 meters deep and contains more water than the combined volume of waters of the 5 Great Lakes in central United States. So in terms of area, Lake Superior in North America is the biggest lake, but in terms of volume of water, Lake Baikal is the largest freshwater lake. Some lakes situated in arid regions are also called ephemeral lakes because they dry up during the dry season. They have less incoming source of water. Actually, there are two preconditions necessary for the lakes to exist and continue. There should be a depression or a basin where the lake is situated, and there should be a source of water, if not permanent, but it should be such that water even remains in the lake during the dry season. So there are two types of lakes, one which is of glacial origin and one which is resulted due to faulting. So depressions can be glacial origin, and these depressions can also result due to faulting. So all the Great Lakes of North America are of glacial origin, and the lakes of eastern and central Africa are resulted due to faulting. Now let us come to another realm of water, that is underground water. This realm of water happens to be under the land surface, as the name suggests, underground water. This water is more widespread compared to the surface waters, just because everywhere below the earth's surface it can exist. It only depends at which depth it is found. So more than half of the world's underground water is found up to a depth of 800 meters from the surface, and the source of this underground water is precipitation and then infiltration of those precipitated water, and surface water bodies also percolate towards the ground and become a part of groundwater. So one important thing related to groundwater is that the spaces between the soil should be there, which is also called the porosity of the soil, so that it has capacity to absorb water. And there is one more thing that is called permeability, so that these spaces between the soil particles are also connected with each other. So if there is interconnection between these spaces of soil particles, then it is called permeability. So water is absorbed due to porosity of the soil, and it gets transmitted from one place to another, or even downwards to greater depths due to permeability of the soil. So two things are necessary for groundwaters to exist, that is porosity and permeability of the soil, and also the source, that is due to precipitation or surface water bodies. Underground water is stored in and moves through aquifers. So this is an important term which is typically defined as a unit of rock or an unconsolidated deposit which can yield a usable quantity of water. So this aquifer is actually made up of gravel, sand, sandstone or fractured rocks which has pores and has permeability also. So depth at which the soil pores or fractures and voids become completely saturated with water is called the water table, and it is a subject to change, because in case of more water or abundant water, which may be due to rains or melting of snow, water table rises, and when there is dearth of water, which may be due to heavy pumping of groundwater supplies, the water table falls. Now let us go through this vertical subsurface cross section of hydrological zones. So the first zone is called the zone of aeration, where the pores between the particles are partially filled with water and partially filled with air, and it is a subject to lot of fluctuation, because when there are heavy rains there is so much of water absorbed in this layer, and slowly the water percolates downwards. So the ore is absorbed by plants, and so the water fluctuates in this layer. And another zone is the zone of saturation, where the pores are completely filled with water or saturated with water. So the surface separating the zone of aeration and zone of saturation is also called the water table, because water table is the level at which the soil becomes saturated with water. There is another layer which is the zone of confined water, and it is a permeable layer between the two impermeable layers, which is called aquitards, and it holds a considerable amount of water, maybe from some other source, maybe there should be some source from the surface or some other water source, water is reaching here, but the two it exists between two impermeable layers. The impermeable layers are called aquitards, and if the layers are completely impermeable, they are called aquiclude or aquifuse. You should remember these terms also, these are important. Now there is fourth hydrological zone, which is called the waterless zone, and as the name suggests, there is no water in this zone because due to pressure of overlying rocks, the density of the rocks at this place becomes very high, and so there is very less space or no space between the soil particles. So this is impermeable and there is no water in this zone. Now you can see and understand with the help of this figure. The first one is the zone of aeration and the second one is the zone of saturation. So the zone of saturation is having water, and well is an artificial opening which is made from the surface to this zone of saturation, from which water is extracted, and you can see there is a cone of depression around the well. If the water is extracted to a great extent, then there is a lot of constraint in this area because the recharge is not in pace with the amount of extraction done. So there is a cone of depression and water table is greatly affected. You can see that water table has lowered in this region around the wells. So in this video program you have learned about cryosphere, which is the frozen water part of the hydrosphere, surface waters that is available on the surface, that is lakes, rivers, streams, swamps, etc., and underground water that is below the earth's surface. And in the next video program we will learn about ocean floor and relief features. Thank you.